So you're now a guest on the Influential Advisor podcast, which you also co-host. How does it feel to be a guest?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the wrong chair for this podcast because we started off where we co-hosted things, but then now you host some, I host some, and I really enjoy it because of the great conversations. But it's good to get to be a guest on the show this time.
That's right. Today we're going to talk about your new book, Sharpen Your Message. What is Sharpen Your Message? Why did you write it? Who's it for?
Yeah, great question. Sharpen Your Message came out of the work that we do with financial professionals because we help them to write books that they use in their practices to grow and to attract their ideal prospective clients. And once you've written the book, you have that foundational layer of all the best things that you do. You can only talk to so many people about it during the day, one at a time. And so you want to share it more broadly. And one of the best things that we've found is podcasting. To go on podcasts, getting in front of those ideal prospective clients and to be able to share your message. When I help financial professionals to prepare for that, because we go for that polished version of their voice that really says things the way that they would say on their best day if they said it exactly the way they wanted to. And yet, when you get ready for a podcast, sometimes the messaging isn't quite there. And that's where I really wanted to write the book to help financial professionals to be ready for those moments when they come up, a podcast, a way to share your message to a large audience of the exact people you're trying to reach. And so the book is in order to help them get ready, and then coaching along with that helps to make sure when the opportunity comes up, you are ready to go.
Tell us a little bit about your backstory. So, how did you get into this? How did you get into coaching financial advisors to not only write and publish books, but then to sharpen their message, both in book format as well as then in speaking formats, oftentimes on podcasts?
Yeah, I didn't have the most traditional route to getting here because for a long time I was a theater director. I come from the world of theater, and my job was to really go through the rehearsal process all the way up to shows to make sure that we connected with our audience on the deepest level. And I had a strange hobby on the side of that because I would say I'm the only theater professional that when I would have downtime, I would go on hikes in the mountains around LA, Fryman Canyon near Studio City usually, and I would listen to books and podcasts on finance, investing, personal finance. This was my hobby. And so I would walk in the hills and I'd listen to this for years. And so I loved the subject. And then, Paul, you remember it one day years ago, we're sitting in the hot tub and we're talking about it. And I'd also had a background in editing books. And so you were telling me about all the amazing things that you were doing, helping financial professionals to tell their stories in meaningful ways that they could use in their practices. And there was just this, I was so interested in the topic. I was so interested in these ideas of these stories that really can motivate people. And so that's where I began my work with you and eventually moved fully over to it. And I love it because to me, it's still a world of stories. The financial professionals that we work with, they have incredible stories from their practices about transformation. And so now I'm still in the storytelling business. It's just in a new realm. And because I had that love for finance and investments, it's been, to me, a dream come true getting to work in this world around those stories.
What's the biggest challenge that financial advisors think that they have when they come to you when it comes to expressing their ideas? I'll set you up a little bit here. For
Yeah.
example, either I'm not a writer or I'm a numbers person. How do
Mm.
you help them break through that?
Right. Well, when it comes to writing the book, that is the starting point a lot of times because I don't think many people identify themselves as writers, authors. I didn't even necessarily until I wrote my book. And process that we have that really is finding the best thing, those stories in their practice, and then bringing it out through conversation. And then you work with a book coach. I work as a book coach. And so I get to be a part of that, asking great questions that help to draw out all the best ideas, the stories, the frameworks, the things that they do to help people the most. And then a professional writer as part of our team that brings those ideas together in a meaningful way that, like I said before, is the polished version of your voice. So when they read it, they're not thinking this is somebody else's ideas. It sounds exactly like them. There was a client that I live in St. Louis now, and that he lives near me over here, and I was his book coach, and he took the book afterwards and gave it to his mom to read. His name's Dan. And Dan's mom said she read it and she's like, that sounds exactly like you. And I get this feedback all the time. And that's exactly what we're going for as part of the process. When it comes to podcasting, it's a lot of times I do hear that. There was a client that I was working with named Morgan, and she started off saying that she said, I'm the numbers person. She had co-authored a book, and she said, my co-author is the one with the stories. I'm the numbers person. I like to nerd out on the numbers. And I said, okay, let's get to work and we'll see. And what I found is that through talking to her, hearing the things that she said, with some shaping, with some guidance, those ideas really came out in the most meaningful and wonderful ways. She expressed such compassion and care for her clients and the way she and her team really worked with them. She said to wrap her arms around their entire financial situation, and you could just feel the care. She said that when clients left, they all got hugs. And the way she was expressing it, she was painting pictures in my mind that I could really see and feel. And so I knew that was going to be something great for podcasts because when people heard it, they'd feel it too. They would be drawn to that, attracted to it, and they would want their financial situation to have those arms wrapped around it as well. And so I think there's this identity shift that happens when you start to write a book, when you prepare to go on podcasts, that even if you didn't see yourself as that person before, very quickly it can transform where you now see yourself in a whole new light. And that new light can really draw people. It's attractive and it brings people towards your practice.
Tell me more about the identity shift, because I think that's something that people don't always think about when they consider writing a book or doing podcasts.
Right.
And sure, you've worked with many financial advisors, helping them to prepare for podcasts, help them write their books. But now this is your first book. And so you're on the opposite end of the table. You're the one who wrote the book now,
Yes.
and you're the one now doing the virtual speaking tour, getting out on podcasts. And I think no matter how much experience we have, we all go through some level of imposter syndrome. Here, from just a personal level, and any clients that you want, what does that identity shift look like, and why is it powerful?
Yeah. When I wrote my book, I was still formulating the ideas about how to help people, about how to help them have these transformations and to make sure they made the most of those appearances on podcasts and really getting that sharpened message out there. And so I was writing it all down. I got it into the book. And then you're right that there's this feeling at the beginning, wondering, is this going to be meaningful to people? Is it going to do the work that I was hoping for? But what I found out through getting it into the hands of the people that I was working with first, that's what starts to build momentum and it starts to transform the way you think about it. Because I'd be on mastermind calls and a bunch of financial professionals would all hold up my book and say, hey, we've got your book. We've been reading it. I like this idea. And, or on different calls I would have with people, they would say marked up copies of the book. And I had to sit back and say, oh my goodness, this is actually resonating the way that I'd hoped it to. I did get part of that polished version of my voice and the way that I wanted to communicate it. And now it's out there helping people. And so even some of my book clients that they've read it and they say, hey, now I feel more prepared in order to share my story. I have an idea even before we met about what you're looking for, what's going to be meaningful here. And that started to change my own identity because now when I'm speaking on podcasts about it, I've seen that it's practical in people's hands and that it is accomplishing part of what I was looking to do with it, at least. And so it builds confidence in me. And I've seen that with financial professionals all the time that they get that book and they're hoping it's good. But when they start getting feedback, when their clients or their family members start to read it and to tell them, I had one today. He is just finishing the book writing process and he put the book into the hand of his father-in-law, and his father-in-law came back and said, that's the best financial planning book I've ever read. And so all of a sudden his eyes lit up and he said, now I feel that confidence moving forward that I want to put that into people's hands because it's going to make a difference. That's the transformation that happens when you capture your best ideas for the book, share them on podcasts. It really does change things in meaningful ways.
What's the difference between sharpening your message through the book writing process versus sharpening your message for the virtual speaking tour or doing guest podcasting? Because they're
Yeah.
similar, but I think they're different at the same time.
No, I think they are. The similarities are that you're trying to find things that connect with audiences, your ideal prospective clients. You want to build trust. That both of those opportunities, that's the trust building aspect of it is so important. And then your stories need to motivate people to immediate action. The book is a little bit longer form that we have long conversations. We get to take time, we edit. It's not the anxiety of the live mic. And so it can be polished, shaped. And so you get it to the point where you say, this is exactly the way that I want to say it. And now it's there forever. That book is going to be there ready to tell your story the best way that you could possibly tell it as long as the book is out. The difference when you go to podcasting is now the pressure's a little more on that you have these moments. I was just doing my first guest podcasting appearance. It was a few weeks back to talk about my book. And I've hosted podcasts. I'm used to this format, but this was the first time that I was the guest. And it was on this platform. And so I went to it on my computer and I'd never met the host before. He did not appear on camera. And it felt more like a radio spot. This was going to air on iHeartRadio in Chicago. And all I see on the screen is a big clock that had 15 minutes on it. And I thought, well, 15 minutes, I can talk on this for a lot longer than that. But he came on and he said, you have 1 minute for every answer. This is going to be rapid fire. Are you ready to go? And I hear the music starting to come down, and he's about ready to introduce and get rolling. And I start, okay, am I ready for this? It's exhilarating, but also a little stressful. And so that's where the power of the sharpened message, what I've found over the course of preparing for these podcasts in the week since, is that the more work that I put into it, the more time that I sharpen my own message, then when that happens, I don't feel as much of that anxiety. I feel like I do have the ideas to share ready to go. And so in that case, with the 15 minutes, I had a good time. It was great, but I definitely realized I need to spend a little more time on this to make sure that when I have these opportunities that I don't walk away from it and say, I wish I had said this. I wish that I had communicated that idea differently, or there was a story that I left out there and I didn't share that might have motivated somebody to action. And so now my preparation is to make sure I have those my go-tos. And so they're ready at a moment's notice when I'm on a podcast to be able to share to get my message out there, my sharpened message.
And you have a term for this. You call it your greatest hits. So explain what your greatest hits are, and then also get into, I think we just heard from someone recently. We were in a mastermind call, and I think sometimes there's two ways to think about it. Should I rehearse a lot
Yeah.
and be very prepared going into the podcast? Or should I just trust that I know the message and be more in the moment? And just from my observation, I think that sometimes you don't want to get to the point where you get overly anxious about doing it, because
Yeah.
then you're not going to do it, right? So
Yeah.
for myself, I would rather go in and just trust that I know the message and deliver it as a baseline.
Yes.
However, and you can expand on this, when I was going through the virtual speaking tour after I published the short book formula, and I was able to get on Michael Kitsis's podcast, which is the largest podcast in the financial advisory space. And so I knew that this was a big opportunity for me.
Yeah.
And tell us the story about how you helped me prepare for that podcast, and then what the results have been as a result.
Right.
You can
Right.
take full credit for it.
Right. Yeah, I will. Thank you. No, no, but it was you. It was the work that you did. And so you get this opportunity to appear on his podcast. You knew it was a big opportunity and you wanted to make the most of it. And so we worked for 2 weeks straight every day. I mean, I was working with you on Saturdays, Sundays, at least an hour, probably more like an hour and a half every single day. And so it's back to my theater background that you rehearse until you can't get it wrong. And that does not mean memorizing scripts, because I would hate that if I had to memorize talking points. And so I think, okay, I'm prepared for this question if it comes up and I've got a memorized talking point. That would never work because one, people don't have time. You didn't have time. And two, it just is tedious to have to sit there and memorize it. But what we worked on is really anticipating the questions that could come up and then creating what you said is greatest hits. And that's what you told me this one because you said if you go see your favorite band, you know, you'll sit through the lesser known songs on their albums, but you're really there for the greatest hits. That's what you want to hear. And even if you've heard them before, it's still the most exciting part of going to see that show. And so, in creating your own greatest hits, these are your go-tos. These are the questions about your practice that you really should have solid answers to. And it doesn't mean scripted. What it means is that you've thought through it, the flow of the ideas, the stories that you can tell enough. And so, when you get asked questions either directly about that or along those lines, you can move to those talking points to that polished version of your spoken voice. And so you really can reach those intended audiences and connect with them. And so we worked for the 2 weeks. And the funny thing was, I don't know why, but it was always question number one, Paul, that you got stuck on because like a lot of times you get asked, "What's your origin story?" first off, right off the bat, and so I'd say, "All right, Paul, tell me about yourself," and it was like blank stare, deer in the headlights.
It's interesting because you're absolutely right. And that was the most difficult question, ironically, was tell us about yourself. But I think for me, there was two reasons for that. The first is there's so many different, in my mind, there's so many different ways I can take that question. And but at the same time, I have to think, okay, what does this audience care about, right?
Yeah.
Do I take them back to 1975 and a baby was born? Do I take them back to the start of my career? But no, the audience doesn't care about that. I'm gonna podcast for financial advisors, and so I have to think it through in a way that it's relevant to this audience and
Yes.
to get it right. And so that was very helpful in just rehearsing it over and over and making sure that the words that I'm saying, because it's the first impression, you're either going to catch someone or you're going to lose someone. And so that was very helpful to really shape that. The second thing I find for myself is that just I think the way my brain works, or maybe I'm a little bit more of an introvert, whatever it may be, I always have this little bit of warm up time where once
Right.
I get going, I'm good. But
That's
it's like warming up a car in the winter. It takes a little bit to get warmed up, and once it's warmed up, it can go, but
right.
it still takes a little bit of time. And so that's why that tell us about yourself for me was the most difficult question.
And that's what I saw every single time was that was difficult, but then we started shaping it. Okay, what are the meaningful things that you can share that are going to, one, attract people from the beginning of the podcast, and so they want to continue listening, and two, as you built that momentum, then everything got rolling. And so through the rest of the questions, but I think, and you can speak to this, Paul, through going over these questions, did you feel when you got to the show, even though the questions you were being asked were different, did you feel the confidence that you had, your messaging that you wanted to share when those questions came at you?
Yeah, what was very interesting and ultimately very beneficial, so was that I was so well prepared, and this was a 90-minute podcast, and so I didn't have any set of questions that was sent to me. I had to be prepared for anything, and
Yes.
because I was so well prepared, there was a couple questions I was asked that weren't really in my realm of expertise, and so I quickly acknowledged the question. I said that that's really not where my expertise is, and so I shifted it. But what ended up happening was that I ended up leading the conversation
Hmm.
in a good way, meaning that
Right.
I knew the direction that I wanted to take the call and the messages that I wanted and the themes that I wanted to share. And so it was the best 90 minutes. It was the most profitable 90 minutes I've ever spent.
Right. Because
Because
what happened after that podcast?
yeah, because it's and this is one of those things about being on guest podcasts, especially when you get on bigger shows that are more well known, is that you have borrowed trust. So they both
Yes.
have an audience, but you also have borrowed trust. And so as a direct result of being on Michael Kitsis's podcast over the course of the next 12 months, I doubled my business, right? And
That's
the
a pretty
amazing
good outcome.
and the amazing thing is that it's an asset that continues to grow even today. I still get any number of appointments on my calendar because someone says, "Hey, I listen to the podcast," and I always ask which one because I'm
Right.
on multiple podcasts. Oh, Michael Kitces, fantastic! And now it's been, what, a year and a half, and so the value of guest podcasting is can be huge,
Yes.
but it also goes back to a couple things, and I'll turn it over to you. Is that you have to the reason we believe that having a book is the first step to then going on podcasts versus just going on podcasts is that the book helps you create the sharpened message. It also gives you more credibility, right? And so a lot of people are experts, but the world doesn't know, they haven't been vetted per se, right? So a book is a signal to people, okay, this person is an expert, they know their stuff, they know how to articulate ideas, etc. And
Yeah.
so I would never have had an opportunity to get on his podcast if I didn't have a book, right? And then the
Your
whole
book is
thing,
the ticket in the door.
the book is a ticket to the door. It doesn't guarantee that the door opens, but
Right.
it creates a lot of leverage and opportunity
Yes.
that a person wouldn't have absent the book. And we've had multiple clients that have likewise gotten on Michael Kitz's podcast, and it always starts with a book, right? Because that's what separates when someone like him who has lots of opportunities to choose guests, and he says no way more times than he says yes. That's just one of the ways that either him or his team can vet people in terms of who would make a good guest. And so that's just a great place to start.
It's funny that there was a financial professional from the Bay Area. He works with a lot of tech industry executives and engineers, and he just shared with us recently, and he was already an expert in what he did. That's who he works with. He understands their world. But once his book came out, he said that it elevated the way they saw him in their minds, and they started coming, his current clients started coming to him looking for help with things that he'd written about in the book. And he said, well, I've been talking about this all along, but now they've seen it in the book, now they want it. And now he's going on podcasts sharing that. He's going on right in front on shows that have tech industry professionals, the exact target audience he wants to, and he's sharing these ideas. And so you're right, it elevates your visibility, but also positions you as that expert. And it's that ticket in the door to so many incredible opportunities like podcasting, like speaking opportunities. When you have that book as that foundational layer, that it leads to so many other things where you can get in front of the clients that you want to work with.
There was another nuance to that story in that, and he told me this, is that he wrote the book, but it wasn't until he started doing guest podcasting and having
Yes.
to communicate the message to people and to an audience where he really felt the identity shift, right?
Right.
Writing the book was checking it off the box.
Right.
Actually going and standing and speaking in front of people and communicating it with confidence is what shifted his identity. And you heard this, he just told us recently that he's now way ahead of his goals in terms of his business development, in terms of bringing in new client inflows
Yeah.
into his business. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons is just, well, a couple things is that he has the confidence to raise his minimums, right? And the second thing is that he has the confidence just to tell people what they need to do versus beating around the bush and saying, well, you might do this or you might do that. It's just, it's the identity shift. I mean, and it's so intangible, but it's so real is that when you go through this process, you become the person that becomes more influential and people see it, but you also feel it. And it allows you to do things that otherwise you wouldn't.
And I feel that part of the book writing process and also getting ready for podcasts, sharpening your message for both, that I hear this all the time. People tell me that it caused me to sit back and really think through the flow, the best stories of what we do, the systems and frameworks. It brings clarity to the whole thing. And so, where a person generally is just in the day-to-day moments, going to meetings and sharing the things that come to mind, this really solidifies the best ideas, brings them to the forefront. And I've heard over and over again, it changes the way that financial advisors speak to their team, the way that they're talking to clients, sharpening your message. When you do it for the book, when you do it for podcasts, it has an impact across the board, every part of your practice. And it helps your team members to all work from the same playbook, that now they all have that same clarity of message that they can deliver for your clients as well. So when it comes to legacy building and thinking through, when I'm not serving the clients myself, but it's my team members doing it, are they going to deliver the same experience that I intended for the people we serve? The book, the podcast can help that because now they have that messaging readily available. It's sharpened and they use it too.
And that's also one of the best things about going through this process, especially for a founder, is that just to what you're saying, oftentimes they've been doing this for a decade, 2 decades, sometimes 3 decades, and they're looking to build, essentially play the role of rainmaker and bring people into the firm so that the associate advisors or partners can work with the clients, right?
Yes.
They're not necessarily looking for more clients for themselves. They're looking for it more for the company.
Hmm.
And the amazing thing about a book and guest podcasting and all these things we're talking about is that when you have that clarified message, that sharpened message, you deliver it, ultimately people come to you and your firm for the message and the
Yes.
ideas, not necessarily for you specifically. And so, just in my own case, I always say this, but everything that we talk about, we do ourselves, right? And
Yes.
so, one of the best things I found for writing books and going out and speaking, et cetera, is that I have a team that delivers, right? In the course of over a year, I've only had one person on a sales call because I still handled the initial sales call, but I only had one person that said, "No, I want to work with you."
Right.
And I'm like, all right, I have some time. Why not? Right. But I have no pushback, zero
Yeah.
pushback, because they're not coming for me per se. They're coming for how the ideas that I've expressed can
Hmm.
help them get what they want. And so that's just one of those things that for any founder thinking about, how do I scale? How do I free up time? How do I take the decades of experience, the years or decades of experience I've had, and continue to build this business in a fun way that leverages my true talents, but ultimately creates opportunity for the company, enterprise value, legacy, all those good things.
Yeah.
This is one of the best ways to do it.
It absolutely is. And case in point, you're absolutely right. You wrote your books, Short Book Formula and Book Marketing for Financial Advisors, and they come and work with me. And I'm working from your playbook. It's the same messaging, and I
I'm,
deliver
I'm
on
in
it.
every meeting without having to be in the meeting.
It's true because of what you put in the book. And it's because you put it there. I know it works. I believe in it. I deliver on the same things. And so they might connect initially with the ideas in your book, but then they come and they work with the member of the team, me, and they get the same experience. And so I think that that's a wonderful way to capture it so you can move on to that role of working on your business and let the team members deliver the service to your clients.
uh, two final questions.
Yes.
You published the book less than a year ago. This was the first time for you to write and publish a book, and already you're thinking about either multiple books or maybe even the second edition. So just take us through that journey, right? So because the thought process is for most people is writing a book is hard. I mean, just getting a book out. Wow, if I could do that, I could check it off the list and I'd be done. But you
Yeah.
see the value of it and you're having these conversations every day. So what's happened for you in terms of your thinking since you originally published the book?
And it's not just me because I wrote the first one and already I've got books number two, three, maybe four in mind. And I hear that from the people that I work with too, that we're working on book number one and they're already thinking, oh, this is going to be the next one that we write together. The difference when I wrote my book is that I wrote it not as part of a team, it was just me. And let me tell you, it was difficult because I love the collaborative process. I come from the theater world. I like to work with a team. And so that's where when you work with a book coach, with a professional writer, and we're having great conversations, I love that process. It's so much more enjoyable. It would lead to wanting to write a second book, a third book. And so what you were talking about, though, the idea of already needing to update it, so I probably wrote it a year ago, edited over the next few months, got it published. The past few months, I've been getting it out there to my clients and getting into people's hands. But already things change quickly, that my thoughts evolve. The stories, my greatest hits that I use, because I've worked with so many people in the meantime, that those are my stories are updated and I want to get them into the book. And so the great thing about publishing your book is that the opportunity always exists to update it, to do a refresh. And now this time I'm working with a book coach and a team member. And so I can make sure that it is more of an enjoyable process as I get those ideas into the book. It's still my voice, it's still my ideas. Everything about it is the thoughts that I'm sharing. But when you have a team, it makes such an incredible difference.
It gets done.
Yeah, it gets done. Oh, that's the other thing, because so many, we work with so many people now. They say, "Well, I've been brain dumping into AI to create my book,
Yeah.
and where's
And,
it gone?"
and, and I'm guilty of this, right? Because
Yeah,
I brain dump all the time. And just like anyone else, I probably have half a dozen books that I've now started, but get stuck
right.
along the way because there's not enough commitment to the one. And so committing to one, and by that, working with a team of people that are also committed to helping you realize the goal is what makes the difference between a nice document full of ideas versus a published book in your hand that you can start using, giving to
Yes.
people and leveraging to go on podcasts. And
It
so,
gets done and it also stays in your voice because that's the thing about brain dumping into AI. You see so much of this content on social media. It all looks the same. It's so clearly AI written and it doesn't look good. There's too much reputation risk in that. You would never want to put that into people's hands. It really comes down to it has to reflect you. It has to reflect your best ideas and showcase your expertise. And without that, you don't want it. You don't want it out there in people's hands. But that's where we work to make sure that it is that polished version of your voice, exactly the way that you would want to say it. And so when you put it into people's hands, you stand behind it and you're excited for them to read it because it really reflects you.
well, I'll add to that is that it's so important to be part of the process and work with people that can help you reach the goal. But the ideas have to be yours.
Yeah.
It has to be your point of view, your stories, your philosophy, etc. Because if it's not, you're never going to use the book. One, you're not going to give it to people. Two, well, you can't go on podcasts because it's like, tell me about your book. Oh, what did I write about?
Right.
And so it really serves no purpose. It becomes something that you check off a box, it goes and collects dust. And so it's so important to be actively part of that process, but to also realize that people can help you bring it to fruition a lot
Yeah.
more efficiently and effectively, and something that you're truly proud of,
Yeah.
and then opens up these big doors that you can do, that you can have to start really leveraging it. And the intention that we always say for at least our clients is that it's not about book royalties, right? It's like, that's not the game. It's about how do you build out, how do you create this so that you can build your business, and
Yes.
how you can build your business in really a fun, enjoyable, and highly profitable way.
And it's often surprising the directions that we go because I think that the initial idea is I want to communicate comprehensively all the different strategies that we use to help the people we work with to do their financial plans and to benefit them. I think a lot of times it's surprising when we come up with these stories from their clients' experiences, but also from their personal experience. And that makes its way into the book and the connections that we draw. That's difficult to do if you're just brain dumping into AI because you're not necessarily thinking about the opportunities that exist there. But with a coach, my number one thing is to make sure that people do not fall asleep when they read your book, that it's something that carries them from chapter to chapter and it keeps their interest alive. And so that's where a team member can really make a difference in helping you to tell the stories. They're already there, they're your stories, but it's bringing them out that can make the difference in the book that you want to use.
Uh, where can people find you?
People can find me at influentialadvisor.com/Gabe, Gabe. And there you can get a free copy of my book, Sharpen Your Message. And my calendar link is there. I love to work with people helping to sharpen your message. And please book a time with me. I'd love to speak with you to see if we can help to work on your stories.
Great. Thank you for your time today, Gabe.
Paul,
This has been awesome.
it's been great. Thanks for having me on the show.